Good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves, but I will share the screen so we can say the blessing for studying Torah. Okay, it was right there. Where? Again. All right, here we go. So, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. Okay, so let's just kind of come up to speed. We stopped at 2 Kings 20, as far as I think that's correct. And anybody remember what we read last time, which was a few weeks ago? So we should probably just summarize where we were. Who's the big power that has threatened Israel and basically taken over the northern?
Was Assyria? Assyria?
Yes, Assyria, right? And who's the king right now in Judah?
Is it Ahaz?
Not, he was, but right now we have Hezekiah. Now remember, the important thing about, okay, so the pattern here has been that Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, of course, is the worst, right? They do bad things, they get punished, right? A new king comes in, maybe does some good stuff, does some bad stuff, gets overthrown, gets killed, whatever, and a new guy comes in. And eventually Assyria takes over the northern kingdom of Israel and the 10 tribes. That's where you get the lost tribes. And Judah is now kind of a very small country, which is essentially a vassal to Assyria, right? But there's a lot of fighting between Assyria and Egypt because Israel's right in between those two empires. And so it's a constant fight between, which empire is going to take over the other one. And Israel is along the way, or Judah in this case. So Hezekiah, remember, is one of the really good kings. There are two very, very good kings. There's Hezekiah and Josiah. Those are the two good ones because they're the ones, hi Christine. Hezekiah and Josiah are the ones who are loyal to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, right, to the God of Israel. They clean up the cult. Unfortunately, they're not necessarily so good when it comes to military decisions. Hezekiah, decides maybe that, he's going to rebel against Assyria, or maybe he's going to be a vassal to Assyria. But whatever he does does not really work too well. So right now he's 6. That's where we left off, 2 Kings 20. And I'm going to share my screen. And here we are. So he's now almost going to die. Now, interestingly, as I mentioned last time, a lot of what's in these last few chapters of the books of Kings, there's sections that are completely repeated verbatim in those prophets sections like Isaiah and Jeremiah. So we do read about this as well in the book of Isaiah. Anyway, does somebody want to start reading? Susie. Uh-oh. Susie, you turned off your camera instead of turning on your microphone. There you go. Now the mic.
Hidden.
There you are. There you are.
Hezekiah's illness. In those days, Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, went to him and said, "This is what the Lord says. Put your house in order because you're going to die. You will not recover." Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord. Remember, Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion, and have done what is good in your eyes. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Before Isaiah had left the middle court, the word of the Lord came to him. Go back and tell Hezekiah, the ruler of my people, this is what the Lord, the God of your father David, says. I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will heal you. On the third day from now, you will go up to the temple of the Lord. I will add 15 years to your life, and I will deliver you in the city from the hands of the king of Assyria. I will defend the city for my sake and for the sake of my servant David. Then Isaiah said, prepare a poultice of figs. They did so and applied it to the boil, and he recovered. Hezekiah had asked Isaiah, what will be the sign that the Lord will heal me and that I will go up to the temple of the Lord on the third day from now? Isaiah answered.
Okay, let's stop for just 1 second.
Okay.
So this is kind of a very interesting, strange story, I think, that Hezekiah is ill, and the prophet comes and says to him, you're going to die, right? You better get your house in order, get your affairs in order. And then Hezekiah prays and reminds God of what a wonderful, faithful servant he's been. And God decides, oh, well, maybe let's let him live another 15 years. And to me, that's a very strange story. Don't you think? Anybody have any reactions to that? I mean, I suppose this gives you some hope that you can, like at the high holidays, for example, before your fate is sealed, you can repent and you can get back into God's good graces, right? Doesn't always work, however, right? Right. I mean, just because somebody's sick and they pray doesn't mean they're going to get better. But it's interesting in this story that's how it seems to work. Like maybe God forgot all the things that Hezekiah did and all the ways in which Hezekiah was faithful. So I think it on the one hand, I think it gives you a sense that it is possible to turn your fate around, maybe through prayer, maybe through something else. But it also, I think, in some ways gives you false hope that it's possible to turn things around by praying, right? But it does say at the high holidays that that teshuvah involves prayer and other things, but prayer is definitely part of it. So, anybody have any thoughts about this? No? Okay. All right, let's continue. Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
Okay. Isaiah answered, this is the Lord's sign to you that the Lord will do what he has promised. Shall the shadow go forward 10 steps or shall it go back 10 steps? It is a simple matter for the shadow to go forward 10 steps, said Hezekiah. Rather have it go back 10 steps. Then the prophet Isaiah called on the Lord, and the Lord made the shadow go back the 10 steps it had gone down on the stairway of Ahaz.
By the way, the shadow they're talking about is a sundial.
Oh.
Yeah, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And I have a note here. Let me read what Alter says about it, because it's very weird. Hang on 1 sec. Okay. Why did that come up? Okay. It says, should the shadow go down 10 steps? What is evidently in question is a kind of sundial, but one that is not a horizontal disc, but rather a series of steps set into a wall, 10 on the left side to show the shadow of the ascending sun, and 10 on the right side for the descending sun. A device of this sort has been found in Egypt. And when it says it is easy for the shadow to incline down 10 steps, This would be the natural course of the shadow. So Hezekiah chooses instead the miraculous reversal of the progress of the shadow. That also becomes a figure for the reversal of a seemingly imminent death. So this is some sort of, symbol that he's going to be able to live longer, and the time is being reversed. And okay, yeah, you want to keep going?
Envoys from Babylon. At that time, Marduk, Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent Hezekiah's letters and a gift because he had heard of Hezekiah's illness. Hezekiah received the envoys and showed them all that was in the storehouses, the silver, the gold, the spices, and the fine olive oil, his armory, and everything found among his treasures. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show them. Then Isaiah the prophet went to King Hezekiah and asked, "What did those men say, and where did they come from?" "From a distant land," Hezekiah replied. "They came from Babylon." The prophet asked, "What did they see in your palace?" "They saw everything in my palace," Hezekiah said. "There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them."
Okay, so hang on just one sec. So Babylonia is now ascendant as the empire that is in control of the region, right? It's going to take over from Assyria. And here's this Hezekiah saying, "Oh, let me show you all." It's like thief comes along and you open your purse and you say, "Look at all the money I have," right? I mean, what is he going to do? He's going to want all that stuff. So, everything was shown. I mean, he doesn't sound like, he may be loyal to God, but he doesn't sound like the swiftest, mind, or not much of a strategist. It's like, here's everything I have, just come and take over. It'll all be yours. Okay, let's go down here.
Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your predecessors have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord, and some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood, who will be born to you, will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." "The word of the Lord you have spoken is good," Hezekiah replied, for he thought, will there not be peace and security in my lifetime? As for the other events of Hezekiah's reign, all his achievements and how he made the pool and the tunnel by which he brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Hezekiah rested with his ancestors, and Manasseh, his son, succeeded him as king.
Okay, so a couple things. Look at verse 19. Isaiah's just said to Hezekiah, okay, not in your lifetime, but right after that, all of these treasures are going to be carried off to Babylonia.
And the people.
And the people, right? And the people. And what's Hezekiah's response?
I don't care. It's not going to happen to me.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that is pretty shocking. What you've just told me, that people are going to be carried away and, people become eunuchs. He doesn't say, whoa, wait a minute, what can I do to stop that, or something, right? This is his people, and he's supposed to be this wonderful king. Something's wrong. Something's missing in there, I think, right?
Right.
As long as I'm okay, then cool. The other thing is, for those of you who've been to Jerusalem and taken the tour of the tunnel next to the Western Wall, we've gone to the Hezekiah, where he built like a well, that allowed Jerusalem to have water. So, because otherwise the water was outside the city. you know, the cistern is the word I was looking for, I think. Anyway, the water was outside of the city of Jerusalem, outside of the walls. So if there was a siege, they couldn't survive. But so Hezekiah built this tunnel that brought the water into Jerusalem. So it's called
Usually
Hezekiah's
the
tunnel.
Romans are pretty good about that too.
Right. But he did that way before the Romans. And you know, I don't know if anybody was with me on that particular trip, but we went, you know, walking through that
Yeah.
area with the water. Right?
Yeah, yes, I was with you. Yes.
Yeah.
Remember that cistern?
Yeah, the cistern is great. The tunnel leading to it is pretty creepy if you have claustrophobia.
Yeah. No,
Which I
it
do.
was fine. It was, but the cistern was interesting because you could look down into it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on. Thank you, Susie, for reading that. And now we are now going to talk about Hezekiah's kid, Manasseh. Does anybody want to read that? Okay, Gail.
Me?
Yeah, you, Gail. I mean, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I meant Christine. Okay, the brain is
Okay.
like, yeah, Gail's right under you.
It
in my
happens. It happens.
computer. I'm sorry. You look alike. Okay.
We all look alike.
Right.
Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. His mother's name was Jephzibah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He still ruled 55 years.
Yeah.
He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had destroyed. He also erected altars to Baal and made an Asherah pole, as Ahab the king of Israel had done. He bowed down to all the starry hosts and worshipped them. He built altars in the temple of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "In Jerusalem I will put my name." In the two courts of the temple of the Lord, he built altars to all the starry hosts. He sacrificed his own son in the fire. Nice. Practiced divination, sought omens, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger.
Okay, so let's just stop for a moment. So Manasseh is a vassal to Assyria, right? And despite the fact that his father was so good and wonderful and destroyed all the altars that were meant to worship other gods, including Baal. Now, remember, Asherah is the female consort, and these poles represent her. And over and over again, we have these altars all over the place, and we have these poles. And so, you know, the people are constantly, you know, going back to that religion, that, you know, polyistic religion. You know, it's easier, right? You have poles and you have idols and you have all these things that you can see and manipulate, as opposed to this invisible God that Moses told us about. And apparently in verse 3, where it says that he bowed down to all starry hosts, those are not Canaanite. It's not part of a Canaanite religion. It's part of an Assyrian one. And of course, putting altars in the temple, you know, that is really low, really low. So he's doing absolutely everything that, you know, has angered God in the past. But he's still reigning for 55 years. You see, here's the crazy thing. And I said this quite a while ago, is that the kings who are not faithful to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and who are, you know, seen as bad kings by God and by the writer of these books, they are the ones who reign for a long time, who make alliances with other countries. It might mean bringing in part of their religion, but they manage to reign for quite a long time, like Ahab and his whole, you know, family. I mean, they reigned for about 100 years, I think. And here's Manasseh, you know, 55 years, that's a long time. And yet, you know, he's criticized for his lack of loyalty to God, to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. It's just interesting how somehow the guys who make alliances with other, you know, kings and rulers, and the price they have to pay is to incorporate their religion into what they do. They're the ones who also are the ones who reign the longest and are the smartest, I think. Okay,
Okay, he took the carved Asherah pole he had made and put it in the temple, of which the Lord had said to David and to his son Solomon, in this temple and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. I will not again make the feet of the Israelites wander from the land I gave their ancestors, if only they will be careful to do everything I commanded them and will keep the whole law that my servant Moses gave them. But the people did not listen. Manasseh led them astray so that they did more evil than the nations the Lord had destroyed before the Israelites. The Lord said through his servants and prophets, Manasseh, king of Judah, has committed these detestable sins. He has done more evil than the Amorites who preceded him, and has led Judah into sin with his idols. Therefore, this is what the Lord God of Israel says. I am going to bring such disaster on Jerusalem and Judah that the ears of everyone who hears of it will tingle. I will stretch out over Jerusalem the measuring line used against Samaria and the plumb line used against the house of Ahab. I will wipe out Jerusalem as one wipes a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. I will forsake the remnant of my inheritance and give them into the hands of enemies. They will be looted and plundered by all their enemies. They have done evil in my eyes and have roused my anger from the day their ancestors came out of Egypt until this day. Moreover, Manasseh also shed so much innocent blood that he filled Jerusalem from end to end, besides the sin that he had caused Judah to commit, so that they did evil in the eyes of the Lord.
okay, so thank you. In verse 13, where it says using the measuring line and the plumb line, that's what was used apparently to make walls and make sure that they were vertical. And it's a metaphor for the rigor with which the integrity of Jerusalem is going to be judged. And obviously, it's going to be judged very negatively, right? Look at all the awful things that are going to happen. I mean, every time God gets angry, boy, it's pretty frightening.
Yeah.
And then I'll get to Jane in one sec. So the shedding of blood probably was of those who were loyal to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, although we're not sure. And Manasseh is called the Jezebel of the South for obvious reasons. In other words, he is not loyal to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, he's loyal to other religions, and that's the worst thing that could happen. Again, in these books that are the historical prophets, loyalty to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is the important thing. When we get to the, prophets, the big fat books of like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and then the minor prophets, it's going to much more be about morality than about loyalty to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Okay, let's stop sharing for a second. Jane, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering where Deuteronomy went. I mean, it has just literally disappeared, not only from the leaders, this idea, if you do right, God will reward you. And if you do wrong, God will punish you. It was so apparent when we were reading about David in 1 and 2 Samuel. And this whole concept seems to have been put by the wayside.
Really? But I mean,
God
just said, I'm going to do these awful things because he wasn't loyal to me. Isn't that Deuteronomic?
Well, yeah, but you don't see anything happening. I mean, this guy rules for 55 years. He's still alive. He should be dead. He should have been stricken down dead, I mean, when I think about Moses, and he strikes this rock, and because he strikes this rock in anger, he's denied the ultimate prize. That's pretty clear cut. You don't see that kind of, I hear a lot of threats, but I don't see any action.
Well, wait a minute. First of all, the whole Northern Kingdom has been wiped out, to punish the Northern Kingdom kings. And then these guys are going to get wiped out too. And the temple's about to be destroyed.
Okay. All right, I'll wait for the temple to be destroyed. But
Delayed
this guy
gratification.
Manasseh reminds me of Trump. He just keeps going and going and going and going, you know? And
Well, that's what I was thinking too.
stops him.
So wait a
Nothing
minute. I'm gonna get to
stops him.
I'm going to get to Jason in one sec, but I just want to say that, part of this is, the Moses stories and all those are pretty fabricated stories. I mean, they might have a kernel of truth, but here you're dealing with an area where there is other evidence for this, like in the annals of of the Babylonians or whatever, the Assyrians, there have been found, markers that talk about some of this stuff and some documents. So on the one hand, they can't make up something about history, right? Like this guy really was there for 55 years, apparently. But, if he did things that were not, to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's liking, then, there'll be punishment at some point. It may not happen right away. They've got to find some way to balance out the reality of history and what the theology is, right? I mean, so if you're right, if the guys who wrote this just wrote it from scratch without any bearing on real history, they probably would have gotten rid of him within 2 years. But he actually was there for a long time. Jason.
Well, I was just thinking about how, if you think about the reality of living 55 years under that kind of time period, think of the generations that grow up under that way of living. And it's kind of amazing that even any of the Jewish practices survived, because over and over and over again, you have these long periods of time when all of the tradition is being pushed aside, and it would not have been popular or easy necessarily to continue. If the temple's gone, how do you do it all? Like, where are the priests? Where's all this happening? So it's kind of, amazing that you can go through these hundreds and hundreds of years with a consistent, degradation of the temple and the tradition, and that it survived. And that there's no temples to Baal that I know of currently, right? Like that didn't last. And here we are still talking about this, that enough people must have preserved and believed in spite of what was going on around them. But if you just think about 55 years in those days, that was many generations passing quickly. And so you could easily have been born and died and never have had a chance to ever go to the temple and ever participate in those rituals. And yet the continuation, it just surprises me.
Well, the genius, I think, of the rabbis was to find a way to make it a portable religion, right? I mean, all these other religions, and including the original.
But they still had followers. There were still people left.
True. True.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I do have to cut off early today, but
I know. You got to go play football.
Not football.
What is it?
Sorry, I don't need to get into it. It's fantasy baseball. It's
baseball.
My son's league. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good luck. All right. Who would like to read? Who is reading? Actually, Christine, you can continue reading.
I was reading. I can continue if you want.
Yeah, please. Let's see. Let me
Okay.
move it down.
Okay, where are we? Amen. Okay.
As for the events.
Okay. Oh, wait. Manasseh rested with his ancestors and was buried in his palace garden, the garden of Uzzah. And Amon, his son, succeeded him as king. Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 2 years. His mother's name was Meshullemeth, daughter of Haruz. She was from Jotbah. Where's Jotbah?
I do not know. Let me see if there's a note here that
I never heard that before.
I don't know. Sorry.
That's okay. I just never saw it before. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done. He followed completely the ways of his father, worshiping the idols of his father. His father had worshipped and bowing down to them. He forsook the Lord, the God of his ancestors, and did not walk in obedience to him. Amon's officials conspired against him and assassinated the king in his palace. Then the people of the land killed all who had plotted against King Amon, and they made Josiah, his son, king in his place. As for the other events of Amon's reign and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? He was buried in his tomb in the garden of Uzzah, and Josiah, his son, succeeded him as king.
it's amazing all the assassinations that go on, in this period of time. So Jason, I hope you don't miss everything about Huldah, who's very important and coming up. My Bible professor had.
I'll stay a few more minutes.
Okay.
Okay, this is very
Getting
important here. So
exciting.
let's just pick up the beginning of this. So, because I don't want Jason to completely miss Huldah.
Okay, Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. His mother's name was Jedidah, daughter of Adiah. She was from Bozkath. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and followed completely the ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left.
Let me just say that Hezekiah and Josiah are the two model kings as far as the cult of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is concerned. Okay.
Okay, in the 18th year of his reign, King Josiah sent the secretary, Shaphan, son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, to the temple of the Lord. He said, "Go up to Hilkiah, the high priest, and have him get ready the money that has been brought into the temple of the Lord, which the doorkeepers have collected from the people. Have them entrust it to the men appointed to supervise the work on the temple. And have these men pay the workers who repair the temple of the Lord, the carpenters, the builders, and the masons. Also have them purchase timber and dressed stone to repair the temple. But they need not account for the money entrusted to them because they are honest in their dealings." Hilkiah, the high priest, said to Shaphan, the secretary, "I have found the book of the law in the temple of the Lord." He gave it to Shaphan, who read it. Then Shaphan the secretary went to the king and reported to him, "Your officials have paid out the money that was in the temple of the Lord and have entrusted it to the workers and supervisors at the temple." Then Shaphan the secretary informed the king, "Hilkiah the priest has given me a book." And Shaphan read it from it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his robes. He gave these orders to Hilkiah the priest, Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, Akbor, son of Micaiah, Shaphan, the secretary, and Uzziah, the king's attendant. "Go and inquire of the Lord for me and for the people and for all of Judah about what is written in this book that has been found. Great is the Lord's anger that burns against us, because those who have gone before us have not obeyed the words of this book. They have not acted in accordance with all that is written concerning us." Hilkiah the priest, Ahikam, Akbor, Shaphan, and Uzziah went to speak to the prophet Huldah, who was the wife of Shallum, son of Tikva, the son of Harhas, keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the new quarter.
Okay, so let me just say, they go to Huldah. Huldah is a prophetess.
Yeah.
The book that they find in the temple is supposedly the book of Deuteronomy. Okay. And clearly, they have not been following what Deuteronomy has recommended, right? Or ordered them to do. And so Huldah is the one who's going to have to authenticate this book. But just like with the prophetess Devorah, where, the rabbis try to say, it's not really Devorah who is the, military leader. It was really Barak and even though Barak is scared to go without her. Here too, they try to say, it's not really Huldah. It's her husband, they try to downplay it, but Huldah is the one who authenticates the book of Deuteronomy. Okay. Go ahead.
She said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. Tell the man who sent you to me, this is what the Lord says. I am going to bring disaster on this place and its people, according to everything written in the book the king of Judah has read. Because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods and aroused my anger by all the idols their hands have made, my anger will burn against this place and will not be quenched. Tell the king of Judah who sent you to inquire of the Lord, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says concerning the words you heard. Because your heart was responsive and you humbled yourself before the Lord when you heard what I have spoken against this place and its people, that they would become a curse and be laid waste, And because you tore your robes and wept in my presence, I also have heard you, declares the Lord. Therefore, I will gather you to your ancestors, and you will be buried in peace. Your eyes will not see all the disaster I am going to bring on this place. So they took her answer back to the king.
Okay, so once again, Hezekiah, just the way Hezekiah was not going to have to suffer the fate of his people, so too Josiah will not have to suffer that fate.
Yeah, great. Now I'm going to
Yeah.
spare you by killing you first.
Well, you'll die before you see all the stuff that happens. So
Yeah.
as my Bible professor said, remember Huldah, right? She's an
Yes.
important figure that nobody knows about. Have you ever heard of Huldah before? No.
Mhm.
Okay. So, oh, hi, Mark and Mickey.
Oh,
I was just
Mark
thinking to
and
myself, I wonder where
Great.
Mark and Mickey are. And there you are.
What time did you guys start?
10.
Oh, I thought it was 10:30. Sorry.
It's always been 10, hasn't it?
Yes.
Oh, well.
That's what happens when you get old.
Yeah. Just so what we've seen in the last few 2 or 3 chapters is there are 2 kings who are considered good kings, Hezekiah and Josiah. They're the ones who are loyal to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. They destroy all these altars on different hilltops, the Asherah poles that are around, and they clean up the cult. And Josiah in particular finds the book of Deuteronomy in the temple and realizes, oh my God, we have not been doing what we're supposed to do. And he, goes into mourning, he tears his clothing. And so both Hezekiah and Josiah are at least rewarded with not having disaster happen during their reign, right? It'll happen to their country, but after they die. Whereas some of the other guys either get assassinated or, killed in battle or whatever it is. So this is where we are at this point. And Huldah is the prophetess who is able to authenticate the book of Deuteronomy that is found in the temple when they clean it up. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes.
Rabbi, the
Yeah.
tearing of the robes, does that have anything to do with at a funeral when you tear the ribbon?
Absolutely,
The black.
yes. Because traditionally you tear your clothing, but in the
Oh, yeah.
Reform movement, we
Okay.
tear a ribbon because, it's like symbolic rather than doing our clothes. But yeah, that's what, when somebody hears of something happening that's very sad or upsetting, they tear their clothing, they put ashes on their forehead. Yeah. So that's what they were doing. I mean, he's going into mourning for the fact that, we really have blown it. Okay, anybody else? No? All right, who would like to read the next chapter? Nobody? Do I have to read it?
I'll read it for you.
Okay, who is that? Oh, Jane, great,
Jane.
okay. Let me go to the next one.
So where are we?
Here we are, chapter 23.
Mhm.
Like all these titles, by the way, are not Jewish titles. They're all put in by the Christians, as are the chapter and verse numbers. Just FYI. Okay.
Then the king called together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. He went up to the temple of the Lord with the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests and the prophets, all the people from the least to the greatest. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the temple of the Lord. The king stood by the pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of the Lord, to follow the Lord and keep his commands, statutes, and decrees with all his heart and soul, thus confirming the words of the covenant written in this book. Then all the people pledged themselves to the covenant.
Okay, again, the book of the covenant that they're talking about here is the book of Deuteronomy, which is found, and it's probably written in this period. So they found the book of Deuteronomy, and they are now pledging to be loyal to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, to follow the commandments, all that stuff, which of course will last for 10 minutes. But then again, we all make lots of promises about the future.
The king ordered Hilkiah, the high priest, the priest next in rank, and the doorkeepers to remove from the temple of the Lord all the articles made for Baal and Asherah and all the starry hosts. He burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of the Kidron Valley and took the ashes to Bethel. Why did he take them there? Are you going to address that later?
Okay, yes, I was about to say something about that. So hang on a sec. Yeah. I have a note that I pulled from yeah, he burned them. Okay. Okay, so this is interesting because this translation says he took the ashes to Bethel, but the way Alter translated it is, and he took the ashes. Oh yeah, it is. I'm sorry, it is bore off their ashes to Bethel, but he says Bethel was one of the two main sanctuaries of the northern kingdom. Scattering the ashes of the statues of Baal and Asherah on that site would be a way of confirming its illegitimacy or impurity. In other words, we're bringing the ashes of these idols and sprinkling them in Bethel, which is not a legitimate capital. Josiah's access to Bethel and later in this chapter to other northern sites probably reflects the decline of Assyrian power in the latter part of the 7th century BCE. So if Assyria had taken over the northern kingdom, right, how could Josiah have access to Bethel, which was one of the religious capitals up there? So apparently this indicates that maybe Assyria is weakening at this point. And we do know that Babylonia is going to take over as the new big power. It would appear that the Assyrians at this point had vacated much of the northern kingdom that it conquered in 721 BCE, and that Josiah attached these regimes to his own kingdom. Many scholars suspect that his campaign to establish the absolute exclusivity of the Jerusalem cult was at least in part an effort to consolidate his rule over the entire country, in effect reviving the United Kingdom that existed in the era of Solomon. So if Assyria is weakening now, maybe they're gone at this point. Maybe Josiah was able to take part of the northern kingdom back. We don't know for sure. But the fact that he has access to Bethel suggests that it might be the case. Okay, does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know why he took them there.
Right.
Yeah. He did away with the idolatrous priests appointed by the kings of Judah to burn incense on the high places of the towns of Judah and on those around Jerusalem. Those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun and the moon, to the constellations, and to all the starry hosts. He took the Asherah pole from the temple of the Lord to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem and burned it there. He ground it to powder and scattered the dust over the graves of the common people. He also tore down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes that were in the temple of the Lord, the quarters where women did weaving for Asherah. Josiah brought all the priests from the towns of Judah and desecrated the high places from Gibah to Beersheba, where the priests had burned incense. He broke down the gateway at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the city governor, which is on the left of the city gate. Although the priests of the high places did not serve at the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, they ate unleavened bread with their fellow priests.
So by the way, these priests who had served in high places where they weren't supposed to, they can't officiate at the temple, but they still are entitled to sustenance, apparently, while they're eating.
He desecrated Tophet, which was in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so no one could use it to sacrifice their son or daughter in the fire to Molech. He removed from the entrance to the temple of the Lord the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun. They were in the court near the room of an official named Natan Melech. Josiah then burned the chariots dedicated to the sun.
Okay, in verse 11, which you just read,
Mhm.
the horses are associated with the worship of the solar deity, as the sun is imagined riding across the sky in a chariot. And of course, sacrificing a horse is an abomination because horses are not kosher. Okay, so now let's go down.
I have a question,
Yeah.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Can we go back?
Oh, sure.
Why did he put the ashes of these pagan things over the graves of the common people? I mean, why is he doing that?
That
Isn't
an
it desecrating their graves, or are these non-Jews that he's doing too? I'm not quite sure what's going on here.
Okay, let's see. This is what Alter says. Two processes of destruction are involved here, grinding down and burning. The Hebrew term afar and efer exhibit a degree of interchangeability. So, and the graves of the common people. The context suggests a kind of potter's field, so that the casting of the ashes of the Asherah here would do further dishonor to it.
Oh,
Which doesn't sound very nice.
no,
But
no.
I guess it's because they were worshiping Asherah and other, in other words, this is a way to make them even, it's like wearing a dunce cap,
Mm-hmm.
Yes, go ahead.
All of a sudden we have male shrine prostitutes, like out of the
Yeah,
blue,
right.
right? I mean, whoa, wait a minute, I missed that one. Right?
Well, scholars believe that there was cult prostitution that went on in, the Canaanite religion.
Well, one of the things, I mean, what it gets called prostitution is probably some kind of
like a fertility thing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that it's like a kind of taxation that you give of your body for the sake of the temple and so on and so forth. Like, in some places, women couldn't marry until they had served a certain amount of time to whoever pays the price to the temple for a certain amount of time before they could marry. And but I never heard it referred to males before. This is very interesting. And I don't know why, and I don't know which deities are involved.
Yeah, I don't have the specifics of that either. But the cult prostitution is referred to periodically,
Yeah.
places.
Women weaving for the temple is, of course, a form of tribute, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty commonplace. Sometimes it's institutionalized and sometimes it's semi-voluntary. Or, you will provide X amount of clothing for the worship of the temple. Oh, by the way, it's your turn, right?
Okay, so let's see what happens next. Here we go.
I think we're at 12.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. He pulled down the altars the kings of Judah had erected on the roof near the upper room of Hazaz, and the altars Manasseh had built in the two courts of the temple of the Lord. He removed them from there, smashed them to pieces, and threw the rubble into the Kidron Valley. The king also desecrated the high places that were east of Jerusalem on the south of the hill of corruption, the ones Solomon, king of Israel, had built for Ashtoreth, the vile goddess of the Sidonians, for Chemosh, the vile god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the people of Ammon. Josiah smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles and covered the sites with human bones. Even the altar at Bethel, the high place made by Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who had caused Israel to sin, even that altar and high place he demolished. He burned the high place and ground it to powder and burned the Asherah pole also. Then Josiah looked around, and when he saw tombs that were there on the hillside, he had the bones removed from them and burned on the altar to defile it, in accordance with the word the the word of the Lord proclaimed by the man of God who foretold these things.
So apparently burning bones on the altar is a way to defile it.
Hmm.
So he's, doing that to all places that are not, part of the.
Well,
Is it
after
like-
it gets done ripping, burning all this stuff down to the ground, does he do anything positive, like build something new?
Cleaned up the cult and brought it back.
Okay. I'm just wondering if there's anything more to the burning and defiling.
Yeah, well, I think clearing it all out and making room for Yod He Vav He is.
Okay. The king asked, "What is that tombstone I see?" The people of the city said, "It marks the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and pronounced against the altar of Bethel the very things you have done to it." "Leave it alone," he said. "Don't let anyone disturb his bones." So they spared his bones and those of the prophet who had come from Samaria. Just as he had done at Bethel, Josiah removed all the shrines at the high places that the kings of Israel had built in the towns of Samaria and that had aroused the Lord's anger. Josiah slaughtered all the priests of these high places on the altars and burned human bones on them. Then he went back to Jerusalem. Glad that's over.
Oh, good.
The king gave this order to all the people: "Celebrate the Passover to the Lord your God, as it is written in the book of the covenant. Neither in the days of the judges who led Israel, nor in the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah had any such Passover been observed. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was celebrated to the Lord in Jerusalem." So this is the real Passover. He's not making up a new Passover.
Right.
This
It's,
is Passover.
because the book of Deuteronomy says, you're supposed to celebrate Passover. And the book of Exodus said you're supposed to, and we didn't. And so he's getting us back on track. Let's get rid of all these high places that, we're worshiping all these other deities. And let's, desecrate all these other altars. And let's get back to being the, proper members of the covenant with Yod He Vav He. And part of that is marking Passover. Christine?
Is the burning of bones, aside from being an emblem of complete destruction, is that one of the reasons why in Judaism there's an emphasis on burying the dead rather than cremation, or is that completely different?
The main reason is that, at the end of time, when you get
You're
resurrected,
supposed to be a body,
right? If you've burnt your body, you're gonna be resurrected as a bunch of ashes.
Okay. And I just want to say that this Halloween, I really want to be Ashtoreth, the vile goddess of the Sidonians. Such a great title.
Or you could be Lilith.
I know, but this is like a wonderful title.
Okay, so they're going to celebrate Passover. He's getting rid of all the bad stuff.
Okay. Furthermore, Josiah got rid of the mediums and spiritists, the household gods, the idols, and all the other detestable things seen in Judah and Jerusalem. This he did to fulfill the requirements of the law written in the book that Hilkiah, the priest, had discovered in the temple of the Lord. Neither before nor after Josiah was there a king like him who turned to the Lord as he did, with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his strength, in accordance with all the law of Moses. Nevertheless.
Yeah, there you go.
Nevertheless, the Lord did not turn away from the heat of his fierce anger, which burned against Judah because of all that Manasseh had done to arouse his anger. So the Lord said, "I will remove Judah also from my presence as I removed Israel, and I will reject Jerusalem, the city I chose, and this temple about which I said, my name shall be there." And for the other events of Josiah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah?
Okay, let's stop before we read some
Okay.
more. So, all right. So Josiah is one of the two virtuous kings, right? Josiah and Hezekiah. So we're going to see, even though it says he's done here, and you know, his story is written in the annals of the kings of Judah, we're going to sort of backtrack a little bit, and we're going to find out a little bit more about Josiah in a moment. And his ending is not a wonderful ending. So the writer is having a hard time trying to reconcile the fact that Josiah is a good, virtuous king who does everything he's supposed to do, and yet meets with a bad end, and then all kinds of awful things happen afterwards. So again, you know, it's like what you were asking about, how did a bad king reign for 55 years? I mean, there's the reality of what really happened, and then there's the judgment about these people, and they don't necessarily conform with each other, because history does not work that way, as we know. Despite the fact that Deuteronomy says, you know, if you're good, good things will happen, and if you're bad, you'll be punished. The real fact of the matter is, it doesn't always work that way. So they're kind of trying to figure out how to balance those two realities. You know, here's this good guy, yet that God was still pissed. You know, so there's no way to reconcile it. It's just, you know, life does not work according to clockwork the way Deuteronomy suggests it. So
Well,
now he's
okay.
still alive, even though he just died. I'm sorry, what?
Oh, no, I was starting to read. I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
interrupt you at all.
Sorry.
Well, while Josiah was king, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the Euphrates River to help the king of Assyria.
Okay, this is a mistake by the scribe,
Okay.
because at this point it's not Assyria anymore, it's Babylonia. At least that's what Robert Alton said. Okay.
King Josiah marched out to meet him in battle, but Necho faced him and killed him at Megiddo. Josiah's servants brought his body in a chariot from Megiddo to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in place of his father.
Okay, so what's happening here in this little paragraph is that Josiah decides he's going to help Babylonia, or ally himself with Babylonia against Egypt. Okay, because as I said, Judah is right in the middle of the whole, you know, Babylonian Empire, which was Assyrian before that, and Egypt. So there's constantly this warring between, you know, the area that, you know, is the Babylonian Empire and Egypt. And as I said, Judah is on the way. And so sometimes the alliances are with one or with the other, depending on what the situation is. So King Josiah makes a politically bad mistake. He allies himself with the wrong group, at least right at that moment. And he's killed. And so, you know, here's this, like, it's almost like an afterthought, because they want to make it sound like so beautiful, like he did all this good stuff and then he died and whatever. But hey, P.S. he didn't die such a wonderful death. It was not the most honorable death, but you know, that kind of contradicts the theory here about being good. All right.
Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. Tell me something. Is anybody named Steve in these chronicles? You know?
Yeah, these names are crazy.
His mother's name was Hamupal, daughter of Jeremiah. She was from Libnah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his predecessors had done. Pharaoh Necho put him in chains at Riblah in the land of Hamath, so that he might not reign in Jerusalem. And he imposed on Judah a levy of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, son of Josiah, king in place of his father Josiah, and changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim. But he took Jehoahaz and carried him off to Egypt, and there he died. Jehoiakim paid Pharaoh Necho the silver and gold he demanded. In order to do so, he taxed the land and exacted the silver and gold from the people of the land according to their assessments. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king in Jerusalem, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Zebedah, daughter of Pedaiah, and she was from Rumah. And he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his predecessors had done.
Well, just because you asked, you got some extra special names there. So you see, right at the moment, Egypt is sort of more in control of the area, but that's not going to last very long. Okay, we have, believe it or not, 2 more chapters to finish the second book of Kings, and then we'll have to figure out what we're doing next. Okay, I'm going to read this. During Jehoiakim's reign, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, invaded the land, and Joachim became his vassal for 3 years. This goes back and forth between all these different powers. So really, there was a time when Israel was independent, like under, King David, for example, and Solomon. But as you can see, it doesn't last that long because it's a small country and it's on the way to, one of the other kingdoms or empires. And so it's generally a vassal. The Lord sent Babylonian, Aramaean, Moabite, and Ammonite raiders against him to destroy Judah in accordance with the word of the Lord proclaimed by his servants, the prophets. We could go back to earlier where there is a prophecy in the first book of Kings about what's going to happen, and it's now happening. Again, unfortunately, it's this very, horrible view of God as this vengeful, king. And thus the reputation that the so-called Old Testament gets of having this vengeful God, which doesn't mean that in the New Testament, like in the book of Revelation, there isn't some sort of, horrible ending either. But there is this consistent note here of, Israelites don't do what they're supposed to do, they get punished. And it's not a soft punishment by any means. So now you've got all these people set to destroy Judah. Surely these things happened to Judah according to the Lord's command, in order to remove them from his presence because of the sins of Manasseh and all he had done, including the shedding of innocent blood. For he had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord was not willing to forgive. As for the other events of Joachim's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Joachim rested with his ancestors, and Joachim, his son, succeeded him as king. Change one letter. Okay. The king of Egypt did not march out from his own country again because the king of Babylon had taken all his territory from the Wadi of Egypt to the Euphrates River. So now Babylonia is the big empire. Joachim was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother's name was Nehushta, daughter of Elnatan. She was from Jerusalem. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father had done. At that time, the officers of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, advanced on Jerusalem and laid siege to it. And Nebuchadnezzar himself came up to the city while his officers were besieging it. And I have a note. Okay, later on, Nebuchadnezzar is going to be very upset that his vassal rebelled against him. Oh, yeah. Okay, so what happens is Nebuchadnezzar is now laying siege to Jerusalem, and he's doing it himself. He's not letting his vassals, his general do it. He's annoyed because these people are not paying enough tribute to him or aren't being, vassal-like enough. And Nebuchadnezzar himself came up to the city while his officers were besieging it. Joachim, king of Judah, his mother, his attendants, his nobles, and his officers all surrendered to him. In the 8th year of the reign of the king of Babylon, he took Joachim prisoner. As the Lord had declared, Nebuchadnezzar removed the treasures from the temple of the Lord and from the royal palace, and cut up the gold articles that Solomon, king of Israel, had made for the temple of the Lord. He carried all Jerusalem into exile, all the officers and fighting men and all the skilled workers and artisans, a total of 10,000. Only the poorest people of the land were left. So apparently Zedekiah, oh no, we haven't gotten to Zedekiah yet. Sorry, never mind. All right, so apparently, yeah, hang on just one sec. So apparently there were two factions in Israel at the time, or in Judah. The pro-Egypt and the pro-Babylonian factions. You know, those who thought, well, if we're aligned with Egypt, we'll be okay, or if we're aligned with Babylonia, we'll be okay. Of course, neither is going to be the case. Christine, go ahead.
Is that one of the reasons that Nebuchadnezzar might have been really honked off is that he probably heard that in order to pay the tribute, that they left the treasure from the palace alone and taxed the people in order to pay the tribute. And Nebuchadnezzar said, okay, now it's time to pay over the real treasure.
Yeah,
You can't weasel yourself out of this.
Well, don't forget, we had, a king showing the Babylonians all the lovely stuff that was in the treasury.
Right? And then not giving it to them.
Just think about that in the future when you decide you're going to come back,
Well,
And of course,
remember to pay your taxes, everybody.
right. Well, what's very sad is that, all these implements that were taken off were, holy, objects that were used for the cult. And, having all that taken away, I mean, not only is that a financial hit, but it's a very profound religious hit too. And by the way, yes, people were exiled to Babylonia, but it wasn't all of the skilled workers and artisans and all of the officers. Okay, there were certain people that were taken away into exile, but there was also people left in the land, not just the poorest, but a lot of poor people. Nebuchadnezzar took Joachim captive to Babylon. He also took from Jerusalem to Babylon the king's mother, his wives, his officials, and the prominent people of the land. The king of Babylon also deported to Babylon the entire force of 7,000 fighting men, strong and fit for war, and 1,000 skilled workers and artisans. He made Mattaniah, Joachim's uncle, king in his place and changed his name to Zedekiah. I don't know why these guys keep getting their names changed, but I guess once you become a vassal to the king, you get a name that is appropriate. Yeah, Christine?
It's like, going to Ellis Island,
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
You have
Right.
to fit in. You have to
Right.
fit into the new empire. So
Exactly. So Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah. I thought we already knew this. She was from Libnah. Well, it's this very same person, even though with a different name. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as Joachim had done. It was because of the Lord's anger that all this happened to Jerusalem and Judah. And in the end, he thrust them from his presence. Now Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Well, that's not a good idea. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar is a very powerful king, and not such a good idea to rebel against him. Okay, is everybody ready for the very last chapter of the second book of Kings, which means the very end of the historical prophets? Pretty incredible. Okay. Would somebody like to read the ending of our story? Okay, Mickey.
Okay. In the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. He encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah.
Okay, so this is where Nebuchadnezzar, I mean, he came before by himself, probably to make sure he got every last bit out of the treasury, but now he's really annoyed because, his vassal, Zedekiah, has decided to align himself with the wrong side. And he's trying to rebel against him. Forget it. So now he's coming in person. Okay.
By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden. Though the Babylonians were surrounding the city, they fled toward the Arabah. But the Babylonian army pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered, and he was captured.
So this narrative is also in the book of Jeremiah. Again, it's very strange that there are chunks of narrative that are in both the books of the, major prophets and in this historical material, but there it is. Okay.
He was taken to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where sentence was pronounced on him. They killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, but they put out his eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon.
Okay, so here is a horrible way to kill somebody or to torture someone. You kill their kids in front of their eyes and then you make them blind. Pretty horrible. Okay.
On the 7th day of the 5th month in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard, an official of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under the commander of the imperial guard, broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the commander of the guard, carried into exile the people who remained in the city, along with the rest of the populace and those who had deserted to the king of Babylon. But the commander left behind some of the poorest people of the land to work the vineyards and fields. The Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars, the movable stands, and the bronze sea that were at the temple of the Lord, and they carried the bronze to Babylon. They also took away the pots, shovels, wick trimmers, dishes, and all bronze articles used in the temple service. The commander of the imperial guard took away the censers and sprinkling bowls and all that were made of pure gold or silver.
Thank you. I'm going to stop it for 1 second because what I want to do is I want to pull out from 1 Kings the verses that refer to this very same thing. So let me get that. All right, let me share this. Yeah. All right, and this is verses. Yeah. Let's read a little bit of this kind of quickly, just so you can. This is the building of the temple, right? So this is like the parallel passage. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, etc. The portico, they made narrow windows. And then there's all this great detail with the cedar planks and the beams and the cubits and all of this stuff, following exactly what God had said. And the Ark of the Covenant and overlaid with pure gold and cedar and all of this stuff, olive wood for the cherubim, and all these doors made of olive wood, and then there's gold and all of this other stuff. And I don't know exactly where the bronze and copper is, but all of this is describing in great detail. Oh, here are the bronze pillars, 15. Cast 2 bronze pillars, each 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze that sat on the tops of the pillars, etc. So you see, it's all this beautiful, very, very, very detailed way of building the temple and using all kinds of really very, expensive and luxurious materials. And so you've had this whole lot, and this is in the first book of Kings. Of course, we are just finishing reading in the book of Exodus, the great detail that was given for the movable sanctuary, the Mishkan, but that's very similar to this. And so you've had all this incredible detail and how important it is to build something like this. And that, it's an expiation for the fact that they built the golden calf. And now you have the destruction of the very same materials. destruction and pillaging and stealing. So I just want to get rid of that other one, otherwise we're not going to be. All right, so we'll continue with. All right, the bronze from the 2 pillars. I think this is where we were, right? Verse 16.
Yeah. The bronze from the 2 pillars, the sea and the movable stands which Solomon had made for the temple of the Lord was more than could be weighed. Each pillar was 18 cubits high. The bronze capital on top of one pillar was 3 cubits high and was decorated with a network and pomegranates of bronze all around. The other pillar with its network was similar. The commander of the guard took as prisoners Sariah, the chief priest, Zephaniah, the priest next in rank, and the 3 doorkeepers. Of those still in the city, he took the officer in charge of the fighting men and 5 royal advisors. He took the secretary, who was chief officer in charge of conscripting the people of the land, and 60 of the conscripts who were found in the city. Nebuzaradan, the commander, took them all and brought them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. There at Riblah in the land of Hamath, the king had them executed. So Judah went into captivity away from her land.
Okay, so Christine.
A cubit is the measurement from the tip of your finger to your elbow. So
Correct.
those things were gigantic.
Yeah.
You know, this was unbelievable. And that sea, the sea was, what was it, 5 cubits wide? I mean, it's just like gigantic.
Well, this
No
was
wonder
supposed to be
it
a
was more
very
than could be weighed.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a very beautiful temple of Solomon, which
No kidding.
yeah.
Talk about
And
impressive.
remember that he imposed a corvée on the people and taxes in order for this to happen, right? And by the way, Nebuchadnezzar is also killing off all the priests, so the cult can't continue again. And of course, the fighting men. So completely, making it impossible for this little country to ever come back for a long time. Yeah.
It's
Christine?
also, I wonder, and I don't know this, but one of the reasons people in China anyway, I mean, in some of the ancient kingdoms in China, the reason they would take the bronze from any place that they conquered was so they could make more armament. That the swords and everything were made out of bronze. So they would like remelt them and everything. So I wonder whether or not this is behind empire building.
Well, certainly Isaiah talking about beating your swords into plowshares was not a metaphor. You use the metal for various things depending on the circumstances. Okay, Mickey.
Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, appointed Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, to be over the people he had left behind in Judah. When all the army officers and their men heard that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah as the governor, they came to Gedaliah at Mizpah. Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, Yohanan, son of Kareah, Saraiah, son of Tanahumeth, and Netophathite. Oh,
Sorry.
boy. All these people and their men.
Yeah,
Anyway,
good.
Gedaliah took an oath to reassure them and their men. Quote, "Do not be afraid of the Babylonian officials," he said. "Settle down in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and it will go well with you."
Mickey, I think you left out Steve.
Yeah. Adam and Steve. Anyway, in the 7th month, however, Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, the son of Elishama, who was of royal blood, came with 10 men and assassinated Gedaliah and also the men of Judah and the Babylonians who were with him at Mizpah. At this, all the people from the least to the greatest, together with the army officers, fled to Egypt for fear of the Babylonians.
So, the intrigue is continuing. By the way, Zedekiah is the last Davidic king. Okay, he's now been taken away. Where is he? He's been blinded and taken away to Babylonia. Okay, and then okay, so we have the last little bit here.
In the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, in the year of Awel Marduk became king of Babylon, he released Jehoiakim, king of Judah, from prison. He did this on the 27th day of the 12th month. He spoke kindly to him and gave him a seat of honor higher than those of the other kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiakim put aside his prison clothes and for the rest of his life ate regularly at the king's table. Day by day, the king gave Jehoiakim a regular allowance as long as he lived.
Okay, so Joachim, who's also Zedekiah, is the last of the Davidic kings, and the king of Babylonia, gives him a certain amount of honor because he is, after all, the king. And so even though, he's a prisoner and all of that, he's at least, treated with some dignity. So what I want to do is I just want to quickly go to Jeremiah. I need to find it. Hang on a second. This is Jeremiah chapter 39. Because it's a similar story. We're not going to read the whole thing, but let me share this with you. So this is Jeremiah chapter 39. In the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army, etc. See, this is very, very similar. The Babylonian army pursued them and overtook Zedekiah. They captured him. They put out, they killed his kids. They put out his eyes. They put him in shackles. They brought him to Babylonia. They set fire to the palace, right? I mean, all of this stuff is very, very similar. Of course, now you have Jeremiah inserted into the story, but I just wanted you to see that, several times there are verbatim stories in the Isaiah and Jeremiah and in the books of Kings. So when we finish a book of Torah, we usually say Hazak, Hazak, Benit Chazek. So you say Hazak, Hazak, Benit Chazek. Means, let us be strengthened. We've just finished a big chunk of biblical material. So I guess the question is, we're okay, like this is the end of this historical section. We're going to end up either going on to the next chunk of prophets, and the language ain't that easy. The other option, I was just thinking, would be possibly to go to the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, because that's more history, as opposed to, Isaiah, Jeremiah, et cetera, there's a lot of, it's not really prophesying the future, right? It's about like, you aren't behaving yourselves as good Israelites. Therefore, God's going to punish you. And then God will eventually relent and a remnant will stay and you'll come back. So we could read that, but the Israelites are able to return to Judah. Right now, they've been exiled pretty much, right? King and the people and everybody. But under Ezra, they do come back, because now, after you've had Assyria be the empire that's in charge, then Babylonia, the next one is Persia. And King Cyrus lets them come back. And that's really the end of the biblical history, is when Cyrus lets them come back. So we could move into that historical material, or we could start reading Isaiah. So what do you think?
Historical, I judge.
I agree with Susie.
Any other thoughts? I mean, the Isaiah, Jeremiah material, et cetera, is not easy stuff to read.
No.
And I don't think we get that far because we only have a few sessions left. So anybody else? Jane, what do you think?
I want to go back to Torah.
Oh, you want to go back to that? That is another option. Of going
Yeah,
back to-
I'm done with this history. I can't believe that I'm saying this as a historian,
Yeah,
but
really.
it just doesn't interest me at all. You know, it's boring. It's just one disaster after another.
I will say the book of Ezra, they come back, they rebuild the temple.
Well, I was gonna say we could end, our tenure with you on a happy note, or
that would
the
be
book
good.
of the Ezra. I miss Torah. I miss the richness of it. It doesn't matter. I mean, we could do Leviticus, and I would get a lot out of it. So, I really miss Torah.
Okay. And what do other people think?
I'm willing to go along with Jane's argument. She's very persuasive.
Anyone
What's
else?
my argument? I just gave you.
I would go with Ezra. I want to
Yeah.
hear the book of Ezra.
Yeah.
And I would like Isaiah. I don't really know it that well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isaiah,
Carl,
Ezra.
Mark, and Mickey, Harvey, any thoughts?
Ezra sounds good to me.
Okay.
It really
Yeah,
makes no difference.
I've never read any of these, so this is all new to me, so.
And Carl is also a historian. Are you sick of the history?
I find them all interesting in different ways. They all say something about the human condition and about the history of Judaism and Jews and the mythology, etc. So I'm quite neutral, and I'm interested whatever way you want to go. I'm fine with it.
Okay. I'll have to make a decision. Okay, I will think about it. So we're meeting again next Saturday, and I don't know what we'll be studying. I'll have to sort of meditate on it.
I have to tell everybody I can't make it next Saturday. There's a memorial service for my friend's daughter, and I have to be there. So I'm sorry, everybody. I will miss you.
We'll miss you too. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.